All right. Well, we are back today with our First Principles podcast. So how about we just start with some introductions, because every week we've been doing new people. We've been introducing new guests and new persons who have different perspectives on education and what we're doing with our school. So if you're just joining us, then, and as you guys are hearing recently, we at a church are starting a tuition-free Christian open to the public school, and we're doing that at rocket speed. So we're doing that by, hopefully, if the Lord's in it, this September. So this September we'll be opening up, and looks like we might have 150 students there, and then big plans forward out of that. And so we've got some good conversations. I think we're going to have some good conversations, maybe even some really good conversations about some millennialism.
So, we'll get to that.
And we're done. How about we start with introductions, though? How about all the way at the end? We've got Mr. Clint Elliott.
Yeah, I'm Clint, Salt and Light, and have been working with Honza for 10 plus years. In the U.S., but mostly in Czechia and now in other parts of Central and Eastern Europe. And it's been a great blessing to be a part of the Daniel movement there.
Awesome. It's really good. And then Andrew Funka.
Yeah. So Andrew Funka, yeah. I'm an American missionary who serves in the Czech Republic, primarily with the Czech Evangelical Alliance. And I'm connected with Honza through a foundation that we have started there called VIAC. We'll tell you a little bit more about that, I think, as the conversation gets going. But I'm also very interested in how we can integrate faith with real life in a way that will shine light into dark places.
Love that. And then Honza, all the way here from Czechia. Do I call it Czechia or Czech Republic?
Czechia, both is fine.
Okay, both is good. All the way here from Czechia. Came all the way here just to do our podcast. That's maybe not true,
It's
but
a good reason. Yeah.
but at least you're here, and that counts for something.
Yeah, so I'm Honza Klin, and I love to work with educators, mostly with Christian educators. And what I would like to see that the society will be transformed through Christians in education.
I love that. I believe in the same thing, that society would be changed by Christians in education. It's a wonderful supposition. I always think about Paul going into Thessalonica, and they said, these are those who turned the world upside down. And that's what everybody said when they got there. When they were in Asia Minor, Acts chapter, I want to say it's 18, but I don't. Maybe I have my chapter wrong, but it's in the book of Acts. I know that. But Paul goes in, and as typical, he went into a synagogue, and the synagogue rejects him and tells him to leave. And so we read a little further on that all of Asia had heard the gospel, and most scholars would agree that that's somewhere in the tune of about 8 million people. And now, is that 100% all 8 million? Probably not exactly that, but it means a good majority of those 8 million heard. And where was Paul? When you read that, it says that all of Asia had heard. And where was Paul doing his teaching from, since the synagogue had kicked him out? Was the school of Tyrannus. And so I think that when we think about education, putting Christ in education, it's something that has always been around in one form or another. And obviously we have a modernized form of education, but that doesn't mean that Christ should not be there. And so to put Christ back in education, that's going to be what's transformative. And that's what's missing in many places. And so you guys are an example of that. I loved a little quote I saw from you yesterday. You all had a speaking engagement yesterday, and you had a quote up on the screen. And so I would love for you to share what that quote is and what that kind of means to you all and why you have that.
Yeah, when things around get darker, the problem is never with the darkness. The problem is always with the light. Henry Maccabee.
Yeah, Henry Blackaby. Yeah. When it's not a problem with the darkness, it's a problem with the light. I always like to point out that darkness does not overtake light. Darkness, if you have a flashlight, no matter how dark it gets outside, the flashlight is still just as bright. It's only when the batteries in the flashlight start to go dead, or if you drop it and break it or something, that would be the only time that there'd be a problem with the light. But as long as you're holding that flashlight, no matter how dark it gets, it can't put that flashlight out. But the opposite is true also, that the equal opposite is true, that no matter how dark it is, if you keep shining more and more light on it, then the brighter it becomes. So darkness doesn't overpower light, light overpowers darkness. And I also oftentimes like to say, we can't be mad at the world for acting like the world. You know, they're not doing anything that they shouldn't be expected to do. And so that really brings it down to where we are. And that's hopefully what we'll get to do today with this podcast, is to make a comparison between what you all are doing in Czechia, what you all are doing with the education system there, and what we're hoping to see happen here, starting with the churches. Because we can't be mad at the world for acting like the world. We can't be mad at the darkness for being the darkness, the problems with the light. And so one of my stances right now is to say we need the church to stand up and be the church, to be the light. We've been put here. No play on our name, but our church name is Salt and Light. But that comes from Christ, who said that you are the salt of the earth. He said you are the light of the world, and nobody lights a light and then puts it under a bushel, but you have it so that all the world can see, so that you can shine for all the world to see. And that's what we want to be. So how about we start with you guys? How about telling us a little bit about your ministry and what you're doing? If you want to start with, I'm going to get the name wrong. Say it again for me.
VIAC Kenia?
VIAC Kenia. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I knew I was going to get it wrong in some way. But how about we start? If that's a good place to start with you guys, then I think that might be a good place to start, that you all could share a bit about that ministry and what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah. So VIAC Kenia is basically designed as a platform through which we can finance different programs and projects related to supporting Christians in education, starting in the Czech Republic, and focusing mainly there. And so when we talk about Christians in education, within the Czech Republic, we have a network of Christian teachers. That's a network of about, over 500 educators now. And the majority of them are teaching in Czech's public schools. And then when we talk about supporting special projects, one of the things that we would like to increase our capacity to help with is building and expanding explicitly Christian schools in the Czech Republic. Because right now, there's really only about, I think, 12 or 15, I don't remember the exact number, but...
And just help give everybody some reference point here. How big is population? How large is the population in Czechia?
So the Czech Republic, geographically, it's about the same size as South Carolina.
Okay.
The population is about 10.5 million, and the capital city is Prague, which is, right now, it's about 1.5, 1.7 million people in the city of Prague.
Yeah. And so 10 million people.
Yeah.
How do you have a number on how many students are in Czechia?
We can say that about 750,000
750,000 students
are now visiting the schools.
Yeah.
And we have about almost 6,000 schools in Czechia.
Yeah. 6,000 schools, 750,000 students. Mm-hmm. And you all are working on a movement, a network of a movement to bring, and currently have 500 Christian educators in the mix of those numbers that we just
Correct.
That we just gave. Correct. And out of all of that, 12 or 13 Christian schools.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were talking just a little bit earlier, one more question to add into that is the non-religious or atheist population of that 10.5 million people. Because from what you all are sharing with me, Czechia and Estonia are the
two most secular countries in Europe.
Yeah.
And then as far as in the world, there would be China, and I think it's North Korea would be the four most secular nations on the planet.
Right.
And so the Czech Republic is in that mix. And depending on, what source you use, somewhere around 84% of the people in the Czech Republic would claim to either be an atheist or just not religious. The majority of them just say, I'm not religious.
Right. And so now back to your all's ministry inside of that. Mm-hmm. So bringing programs and what was that?
Projects. Programs and projects.
Programs and projects into this 750,000 students. So maybe a little elaboration on that, like how you all are doing that. And
I will give one example what we did when there was an anniversary of the translation of the Bible to Czech language. There was a 400 years when the first translation of Bible has happened, and so we have decided to create a program for school about Bible. Bible, the book of the 21st century, and so when we create that really very well, this curriculum, we ask Department of Education for patronage for our project. And their answer was clear, so no way. Yeah. So, okay, what we can do, so we take this material and put it on the government website as a resource for educators. And we were honored by the Golden Prize for the best material of the year. Yeah.
wow.
So later on, when we started to do our other spiritual heritage programs, yeah, we after this we have been receiving the patronage from Department of Education.
Wow. Yeah. See, that's awesome. So how long has your ministry via Kenia, how long has that been in operation?
Well, VIAC Kenia is relatively new. We just started the incorporation in 2019, and I think we completed it in 2020.
Oh, wow.
So VIAC Kenia is a new organization, but the network of Christian teachers goes back to 2010 and was a joint project of an organization called Josiah Venture and the Czech Evangelical Alliance. It does a lot to support these kind of networks, trying to get Christians together so that they can support each other, encourage each other, and find ways to shine in their areas of common interest.
I love that.
Yeah. And so the network of Christian teachers started significantly earlier on. But Honza, when was it that you connected with the Daniel movement, brought not exactly exponential growth, but a significant step up in the organization of that network.
Yeah, it was in 2014 when I, for the first time, met Clint on northern Minnesota, and I was part of 6 weeks training called Daniel Leadership Institute, and learn more about this Daniel movement, the Daniel programs, and what I was taking out of this time, I would like to really have this Daniel weekend running in my country. So with the Clint's help, following year, in March, we organized the first event. And after this, another, we translated everything into Czech language, shape it a little bit for the Czech culture. And through these weekends, mostly weekends, later we add also the week program, we have seen the growth of our network from 120 to actual 500 people.
Yeah.
And we actually met the year before, remember, at Roddock's Flat when we had lunch. He invited you for lunch, and I was telling you about the Daniel Leadership Institute. And as you explain that to most people, their response is, well, that's crazy. I would never do that. And yet you were very interested, very intrigued, and you actually came the next year to 40 Days in the Wilderness. And I remember, because Lori and I have a picture hanging on our wall of you and I and Lori and another participant sitting on a sailboat. We were on a sailboat for 3 days in the Apostle Islands, Lake Superior. And part of that training is really being open to what God would have you do in your life and developing plans, and we call it a dreaming session. You know, as we grow older, we're often just sort of dreams are pushed out of us, and in this sense, God-given dreams, really inspired. You know, Ephesians 3, 20, 21, the things that God wants to do in our life that we can't even imagine at some point or even pray big enough. But we sat on that boat, and this picture reminds us that Honza really began to dream and to articulate, what if we could do this in the Czech Republic someday?
Wow.
And we began to plan and write out plans. He wrote a plan of action. And we do this crazy thing on the shore near the end of the 40 days where we write 7-year letters. and we will often write about somebody else participating in the program. And I wrote mine about Honza, and I don't know why. The Lord inspired me, and I said, 7 years from now, Honza is going to be a leader in Europe in really encouraging and impacting and bringing transformation through Christian educators.
And I remember when you were sharing this, I was thinking, he's crazy. Yeah. The Czech Republic, 10 million people. Yeah, we have such a big field to work. Yeah, why in Europe? But I remember when you have been telling this, I said, "But Lord, if you would like to use me, I would like to be used by you." Yeah.
And he now sits on the board of the European Association of Christian Educators, and will be hosting their annual gathering in a month in Czech Republic.
Oh, I love that. I say with our other pastors at church, his name's Kirk, and he'll be on here one day, I'm sure, but we like to say, what will the Lord do with our yes? He's always calling us, but what will he do with our yes? If we'll say yes to him. And so I love hearing that you heard this and said, okay, Lord, if you want to use me, then I'll do it. And I think many times that's where we find ourselves, at least I can say that's where I find myself to say, Lord, I'll do it if you call me. If you show me, then I'll go. And then he goes, oh, well, you said yes. So then here we are starting a school in 6 months. So, and so Clint, I'd love to hear a little bit more too about, so obviously you met Honza, how many years ago was that?
2013, was it? I had been in the 40-day Daniel Institute experience in the northern woods of Minnesota, and met for the first time, I think, in my life, people from the Czech Republic. There was a young couple that came, educators from the Czech Republic. They were invited and brought through an Eastern missionary organization. And getting to know them through the summer in the Institute, and really wondering, what's God doing? Why is he bringing this young couple into the Daniel Leadership Institute? And her name happens to be Daniela.
Yeah.
And
Providence.
So, yes, the director, gave me a plane ticket and said, go find out. And I spent a week with them in a town called Český Češin. And one day, Radek, the husband of that couple, he invited Honza over, and that's how we met. And we couldn't have imagined, and Lori always encouraged me, Lori, my wife, would encourage me, step into these things, because we don't know what we'll miss if we don't say yes, right?
That's right. What will he do with our yes?
If we say no, is he really Lord, right? And so as we step into these things, we couldn't have imagined at that point, I don't think, what the Lord was going to do, and in and through not just us, but all the many people that have been impacted by Honza's ministry and Andrew's ministry. And I love to see the collaboration as these come together, because that's always been a big part of our passion and our focus and view, is this transformation, collaborating with other ministries. And Honza's very humble, but he serves in leadership positions in a number of key ministries in that part of the world. And it's wonderful to see them collaborate and come together and do more together than they could alone.
But sometimes it starts with the important small decisions. Yeah, I remember when I was thinking about your invitation, and I was thinking, oh, it's probably not going to work. Yeah? And when I was sharing this with my wife, I was surprised by her reaction. She said, take the girls and go. Yeah. So I started to count, okay, so I need to pay for these 40 days, my ticket and 2 other tickets. Yeah. And when I saw how much I need to raise, I was like, oh, no way. But it doesn't take even maybe 3 or 4 weeks when there was a place when my girls were able to go to Christian camp, spend these 6 weeks in US. Yeah. And so when God is calling to do something and we obey, he's also providing.
That's right. What he wills, he enables.
Yeah, amen.
Yeah. So, yeah, I love hearing that too, just about, we look at it from the standpoint of finances or whatever it might be, and we go, oh, no way. And I always think that's when the Lord works the best, or at least when we see him the most. It seems like when we have to recognize there's no way I can do that. I can't come up with that amount, I'm trying to think of the way you said it to me the other week, Clint. This is at risk of you not remembering either, but you handed me a Post-it, and I'm trying to think of the way the quote went on the Post-it, but it said something to the tune of if the dream is too small. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. If the vision
That's right.
is too small, the ask is too big.
Yeah, that's right.
And Honza, you may remember, we were at a men's retreat here in Kentucky, and that morning I was Zooming with you and with Graham in England. And Graham is also on the board of the European
Oh, it was
Association.
with Honza
Yes.
that you got that quote?
And Graham shared that quote with us,
know
and
that.
we were talking about some of the things that were happening there, and Graham shared that quote.
Yeah, if the vision.
And then I shared it with you.
That's
yeah.
right. I know I'm saying it stuck with me, and I just say I forgot it. But I keep thinking of it often. If the vision is too small, then the ask is too big.
Yeah, and just the idea that the Lord, we look to Him with great expectation, and He intends to do great things in and through us, and invites us into that. And if we have a small vision, then we don't have that motivation, that great inspiration that comes from the Lord. But when He gives the church or a person a great vision, we get inspired, and it's like Bob Goff would say, it's reckless love. It's that crazy in a good way.
Yep.
Recklessness for the Lord in a good way. I'm in that kind of thing. Right?
Yeah, pure faith.
Yeah.
So, I do love that. We were at that Bob Goff study yesterday, and they I don't remember if it was in the video or if somebody else started talking about it, but they made the comment about Walt Disney. And he used to go into his meetings, and he'd have an idea, and if all of his board members were on board, they were all in agreement, like this is a good idea, he would crumble it up and throw it away because it wasn't big enough, it wasn't wild enough.
Yeah.
If everybody was in agreement, if there wasn't somebody saying, wait, you can't do that, then it must be too small. And so I was also thinking that when hearing about you bringing the Daniel plan to Czechia, the idea that try to get a church in the U.S. to do that, and we're friendly to faith and have lots of people who would claim Christianity, and they wouldn't do that. And so the thought of taking that into a secular country that how many of to say 84%. We're saying that less than 2 million people claim faith in Czech Republic. Is that accurate?
Well, of that 84%, those are the non-religious and the atheists.
Right.
So then you've got the agnostics and other things. The Czech Republic is, I think, the country that has the highest number of people who claim Jedi as their faith.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
I wonder what that actual number is. That must have a convention or something, the Jedi convention. And I just picture all these guys like trying to move stuff. It's just not working for them.
I think some of it has to do with how these surveys are conducted and the Czech sense of humor.
I'm sure.
And you mentioned yesterday, I think, the percentage of evangelicals is what?
Well, the percentage of evangelicals is very small, less than 1%.
Wow.
So depending on who is doing the measurement, there's somewhere between 30,000 and 70,000 real evangelical Christians across the spectrum of both Protestant and Catholic in the Czech Republic. So that's
The harvest is plentiful.
yeah. It's full of opportunity. But by some measurements, that would mean that the Czech nation is unreached. So
That's right.
yeah.
But that also leaves some curious opportunities as well, because you all were speaking yesterday a little bit about the reception to the gospel. It's not unfriendly to the gospel.
It's not, people aren't so unfriendly as just they just really don't know.
Yeah. But you had made a comment that it was almost like they were, I can't remember the word you used, but maybe like they were kind of like in their non-religion. It's not like they're open to think something else. You know?
What you find, this is a curious thing actually, because I think what what I've encountered with people and what I hear from others is what is often the case. Somebody who is not religious also tends to hold a variety of kind of contradictory ideas and haven't really completely thought through what they actually believe about bigger questions and bigger issues or spirituality. And so they'll tend to kind of practice a lot of superstitious things, but at the same time, they just haven't thought it through. So one of the things that we as Christians can do to serve people in that kind of position is teach them how to be good agnostics, help them learn how to be good seekers. And so, I think maybe what I mentioned yesterday is that in some countries, we struggle with nominal Christianity.
That's the word I was looking for, yes.
People who claim a connection to Christianity, but it's more of a cultural connection or something like that. They haven't really thought about what does it really mean to be a follower of Christ. And so in the Czech Republic, you have a lot of people that haven't really thought through what it means to be an atheist. So they're like, I don't believe in God. Well, I believe in something, maybe.
Yeah.
There's something out there. So you have in the Czech Republic nominal atheists, which are prone to being led into faith.
Sure. Yeah. That's back to it's not just a plentiful harvest, it's a ripe harvest. So that I like low-hanging fruit. Let's get to that stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe a little bit too, what is currently happening in maybe Czechia or also in your all's ministry, or maybe kind of between the two? What are some of the current events between your ministry and also the country that you could speak into?
Well, I think maybe start with what's happening in what we're doing with VIAC Kenia to contribute to education. And we're looking for ways both to help overall improve the quality of public education, especially in the Czech Republic. But we also want to support explicitly Christian schools, because ideally through Christian schools, we can have a shining example of what education could be, so that it can inspire the other schools to up their game a little bit as well.
Yeah.
And so some of that is done through this Daniel movement, where we're working with Christian teachers to help them be the best educators they can be and integrate their faith with their vocation. Some of it is through projects that we are sponsoring, such as the Stories of Humanity, which is challenging students to come up with ideas and projects for how they can improve their community. And so this is where, through the Stories of Humanity competition, we have examples of a group of elementary school students who said, hey, there's a nursing home right next to our school. What could we do to make life better for the people that are in that nursing home? And so the students themselves designed an adopt a grandparent project for that nursing home out of their school. Or another group of students that live in a smaller village, there's a popular forest recreation area next to their village, and it was really trashed. And so the students initiated a project where they went out, they cleaned it up, they replanted trees, and made it back into a beautiful natural area that everybody can enjoy. And so there you see an example of caring for the environment, what we would call creation care in action. That's a result of the program that we are doing in character development and ethics in public schools through Christian educators. So contributing to solving problems not just through our direct effort, but also through what we are passing on to these students through their education, to help them see how they can make a difference and that they really can make changes in their immediate communities.
Yeah, it's great. I'd love to hear y'all's perspective on a little deeper perspective, as we said in the beginning, about bringing Christ into education and that being transformative. And I think a little bit about what you were saying there obviously speaks to that, but I'd love to hear some of your all's personal testimony about Christ, bringing Christ into education and how transformative that is. Because as much as certainly the viewer that watches this or listens to this is probably going to be for Christian schools, but this is out for the world to hear. And so there's plenty of people that don't fully understand what would be so important to put Christ back into education. Why would that be an important factor for our students? Is that really needed, or is that just one more bit of busy work that so long as they can check the boxes? So I'd just love to hear your all's perspective on bringing Christ into education.
I think a nice quotation about this is from John Amos Comenius, who said that we would like to accomplish such a humanity that not only know what is good, like what is good, and do what is good even in no one is looking. And this complete transformation of our inner selves, it can be done through Christ. And the way how we can work with this in public schools is to really first prepare the young people to just think about differently about their life, and through example, to help them that they can be the different person. The approach of the character.
Yeah. John Amos Comenius is the father of modern education. He is the one that developed the philosophy of a student-oriented approach to learning that is the basis for how we conduct formal education in Western civilization today. And he was a Christian. He was actually a Protestant bishop in the Czech Kingdom in the 1600s, and as a result of the 30 Years' War was exiled and did a lot of his thinking and work about education after the exile, but also left examples of it within the Czech Kingdom. And so the fact that, actually the foundations of how we approach formal education today was the result of a Christian who was coming from a biblically informed worldview, I think is really important, and gives us an avenue through which we can bring Christ back into our schools today, and in ways that don't necessarily have to explicitly invoke the name of Christ, but are going to come empowered by Christ because they're based on his principles and the values that God designed for us to live with so that we can flourish as human beings.
Clint, you said something earlier before we started recording about even something that maybe Richard Dawkins had said last week. Did I hear you say that right?
Yeah, I read that Dawkins had responded to something in their culture in England that was maybe not necessarily anti-Christian, but it wasn't promoting that as a cultural worldview. And the way I understood his response, although he's a professed atheist, avid, renowned, but said, while I don't believe what Christians believe, I understand that the Christian worldview is the best worldview for culture. And that's really what we're talking about here in some sense. And you said, as the founder or the teacher of nations, how did you refer to Comenius?
The father of modern education.
The father of modern education, I've seen him referred to as the teacher of nations. Unfortunately, maybe not well known in America today, and that foundation is hard to find in America today in the public schools because it has been replaced by others who brought in an education system many would attribute to the Soviet Union 100 plus years ago. But as we were talking last night, one of our earliest federal education laws in the U.S., 1787, was the Northwest Ordinance. As the country was moving west, they developed a system of how those territories would be governed. And one of the principles was the importance of education for the next generation, built upon, and this law says, built upon morality, knowledge, and religion. And as our U.S. Supreme Court has said at least 4 times in published opinions, when our founders talked about religion, they were talking about the laws of Christ. They were talking about Christianity. It's very clear. And so that was the foundation of our education system, this 3-legged stool, which you were reminding me, Andrew, is probably an illustration from Comenius originally.
It echoes Comenius's own approach to education and the different classrooms through which we learn, which includes nature and the natural world, which includes the world of faith. And what's the other one? But those 3 legs of the stool.
Character, morality.
Character and morality.
Values.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Which I think is so important when we think about First Principles Academy and the opportunity. As I understand Comenius, his philosophy of education, that biblical worldview, was really emphasizing application, quick, immediate application for students. Get outside and live this learning and experience it, and object lessons outside, as you said, in nature. And boy, we have such great opportunity where Salt and Light is with that property and learning experiences in the world, and not just in a row in a classroom, and not just rote memory, but really, how do we practically implement this in our lives in a way that's meaningful?
I like these 3 main things because I believe what Comenius said about this is that knowledge, it's for ourselves. The morality is for the others. That spirituality that we need to really develop in our relationship with God. And educating all these 3 things together actually make the person whole, complete.
Yeah, holistic education. That's the point. And we've become so lopsided in our means of whether it be social justice or political correctness. And I can't speak for obviously Czech Republic, but I can say here in America we've seen that where we're so concerned to make sure that we can check the right boxes at the right time that the actual care for and education of a student, not just a number in the classroom, but to say, like, this is a person who we want to develop their character and we want to develop them. And certainly some of that becomes very difficult when you have classrooms of 50 kids or whatever it might be. And so I think that obviously can add some of it. But if you take away the spiritual element, if you take away Christ, if you take away God from that, then our natural selves are yearning for that. Our natural body is going to yearn for something. We know that there must be something. Nature itself cries out. So as they learn of that classroom of education, they're certainly having a yearning to say, even nature cries out that there must be something, there must be someone. And unfortunately, what we have in our most modern, not Comenius obviously, but in our most modern education, what we have is to say that has to be something that is not God. At least that's how it is here in the United States. We're not allowed to say that thing that you seek could be God, this thing that could be the answer could be God, because we've too often said, well, that we have to look at the scientific method and say, well, it can't be God. It has to be what I can test and taste and see. And then if I can do those things, then I can see it as viable to put in the classroom. But if it has anything to do with something spiritual, we have to keep it out of the classroom. And that's been the slope that we've been on, to the point that we are now, where we have classrooms that only want to say, check the right boxes. Can you answer the right questions at the right time? Take the standardized test. And I think that's a big part of what we want to see at our school, is to see, we want to bring Christ into that education to redeem the education. That's the end goal is not simply to be another program of the church. The end goal is to say that we genuinely care for our students who are missing an element of their education from the youngest ages, where, by the way, God told us often in his word to tell our children, remind our children of him, teach our children of him, put it into songs, put it on your doorposts, put it on the gates, teach them when you go in and out. Everywhere that you go, make sure that you teach them so that they will know and the next generations will know.
Certainly critical for today in the United States, so that they'll set their hope in God and think about what kids yearn for in terms of trying to find a place to set their hope. And the one thing I love about the opportunities in Czechia is I think you step into these spaces and there are opportunities for the kids and for the teachers and for others to start to ask those questions, that you can fill in those gap areas and return to that original foundation. I think of, again, the first, not federal law, but the first education law we had in the colonies, 1647, and it probably came from Comenius. 1647, it was called the Old Deluder Satan Act. And it required, and it was a law, it required when your township grew to a certain number of families, you were required to hire a teacher for this purpose, the law said, to teach the children to read so that they can read and handle the scriptures for themselves. So Satan, the old deluder, would not be able to delude them. The first education law in the colonies, that was the foundation, right? And great purpose in bringing up the next generation. Not just to set their hope in God, but to be able to stand against the old deluder.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and these differences between having Christ as an integral part of education and trying to eliminate any mention of spiritual things from education is why there is still great value in explicitly Christian education and having Christian schools.
Yes.
So we like what we're doing in the Czech Republic with VIAC Kenia in supporting educators who are working in the public and secular schools. We are at the same time looking for ways to support the development of Christian schools, because then they can be the example of what happens when you bring all of that together. So one of the things in my past, I spent a number of years on the board of the Christian International School of Prague. And this school was started back in the early 2000s, first as kind of a homeschool collective of missionary families. So it originally was a school that was serving Christian families and their needs. But as the school grew over time, and what it exists as today is a larger institution of learning in which somewhere between 60 and even 70% of the student body are actually not Christians anymore. And so it's gone from being a school for missionaries to being a missionary school in which the teachers and the administration and an important part of the student body is made up of Christians. But that creates an atmosphere for education that non-Christian families really like, because they like the atmosphere, they like the encouragement. The fact that this school has a value system upon which it can base appropriate discipline contributes to that positive atmosphere. And it's a way of helping non-Christian families discover Christ through providing an environment for education that really facilitates learning. And that's a value of an explicitly Christian school in such a secular environment.
Yeah, Hans, I remember when you took us, when we came, Lori and I and another couple, to lead the first annual weekend there, and then developed a training team so that you all thankfully can lead those weekends in your own language. You took us on a side trip to Pardubice to meet the principal, the headmaster, and some of the teachers at that private Christian school in a large city, in a secular environment. And we weren't sure what we were going to talk about, and we had some ideas, but when we got there, we just started whiteboarding some creative ideas, and the principal and some of the teachers, they just in tears, they wanted to talk about how do we evangelize our community? How do we reach these parents for Christ? Because it's what you're talking about, Andrew. They are a private Christian school, and most of the families, as I recall, that came there were not believers, at least when they first came there. But they saw in that difficult secular environment a place of peace, and they wanted to be a part of that. and they appreciated the values. They maybe not could define them at the time, but they appreciated what was there. There was a sense about the place that was a place of peace. I think of Jeremiah 29 as God instructed the exiles, work for the shalom of the place I've put you. And that school there, I think, is an example of that. And those teachers were so passionate about reaching the parents for Christ. And it was a great example.
I'm so glad y'all are saying that, because that's been a huge question mark for some at First Principles, the school that we're starting. Is my vision of that has been that we will not have a statement of faith for the student to sign and say, I believe this. The common theme today is, if you take your child to a Christian private school, is that you have to sign a statement of faith that says, I believe this. And our point would be that we want to reach those and say, not that we're not going to teach that. We want to say, or not that you believe it, but to say, this is what we're going to teach you. You're signing the statement of faith is to say, this is what we will, our aim is to teach you this. Our teachers are the missionaries, and the students that would come would hear the gospel. And the huge question mark that everyone has is, well, then, what are you going to do about, when this problem comes in or that problem, aren't you letting all the problems in? And I just remind them and say, Jesus said, those who are well don't need a physician, but it's those who are sick. And, the things that I heard you mention the discipline, the ability to discipline in a proper way. And one of the things that I keep impressing on people is to say, we will have a code of conduct. It's not the Wild West of schools that just allows every kid that gets kicked out of the school because he was being bad gets to come over to our school. Just because we're open to the public doesn't mean that everyone has to be able to come in. It's still a private school in that sense, that we can say our code of conduct says this is how we behave because this is what we teach. And if you can't behave in this way, then you don't get to be part of that. And I believe that people will want to be a part of it. And I've been saying this over and over. I believe when people see the difference, they will want to be a part of it. So to hear you speaking of these private schools in Czech Republic, even though there might only be 13 of them, 12 or 13 of them, but the secular community sees the difference, and maybe they can't define what it is, but they want to be a part of that. And I believe that is how Christ redeems, just as he redeems so many other things. He can redeem the person, he can redeem the marriage, he can redeem the education. And he will be the difference. And I believe that'll be what we'll see in our school. And I was also glad to hear you speaking of trying to expand that explicitly Christian schools. Our goal with First Principles, we have it in 4 stages. And those first 3 stages are all in our church. We want to start in our lower building, then we have an outdoor building we want to remodel, and then we want to build our own standalone school that's not connected to the church. Maybe just the driveway is connected to the church. But the 4th phase is that we would have a foundation that we could help other churches do the same, that we could be inspirational to other churches, because what we do have, we're not a secular nation. I mean, we are, but we like to hide it. And so we're hiding our secular. We're like, no, we're Christian, but we're secular. But there is an infrastructure across the nation of churches, physical buildings that are sitting empty. I've been challenging people. I say, how much would you love here in America? How much would you love to have a youth program that had 100 kids coming on Sunday night? And of course, who wouldn't love that? And I say, well, our goal is going to be to get 1,000 kids 5 days a week. And then we're going to put Christ in their education, that thing that they're already going to be receiving. And now we're going to allow him to redeem that. And the church body, not just the local church of Salt and Light, but the church body could participate in this. And I found right now that that's challenging to many because that's putting them on notice, So I'm curious to see how all that's going to play out. I'm looking forward to the 10 years from now to see, who the Lord inspires through all of this.
I appreciate what you're saying. For me, probably 15 years ago, sitting in a prayer meeting, the Lord really impressed upon me, Mark chapter 10, beginning in verse 13. They were bringing the children to Jesus, and the disciples rebuked them. The disciples turned them away. Oh. It's one of the places in Scripture where it just says Jesus was indignant. and he said, let the children come to me.
Yes, that's right.
And I was thinking as a lawyer then, and trying to figure out how to live as a Christian lawyer, and navigate that, I thought, sometimes misinterpretation or misguided communication about even our legal freedoms, some good-intentioned Christian educators in a public system or a private system are just ill-informed, and they will keep kids from coming to Christ. They will do things that will rebuff a child's inquiry or their curiosity about the spirituality and the opportunity that opens. And so I love the idea that you're not putting up a gate and saying you must profess this before you can come into our space. Come all who may.
That's
with
right.
some order, because
That's right.
the Lord's about order, not chaos. But in that way, it's a mission.
That's right.
And it's a ministry. And we're about global ministry and missions. We ought to be about local ministry and missions. And so, and why wouldn't we be about the next generation, bringing them to Christ? And it challenged me to see the disciples who were learning to become the church, and they were the ones that blocked the kids from coming to Jesus. Mm-hmm. Misinformed.
Right. And for Christ to stand so strong to say, let them come to me, for such is the kingdom of heaven.
Yes.
And so that's what we see. And our mission field here in America, the student body, I've been trying to lovingly encourage that this mission field is we're silent. The church is silent on this mission field of our students. We have 55 million American students that go to public education every day, and that public education insists to them that there is no God, or that if you do believe in God, it's okay for you to believe in God, but it's like this kind of tooth fairy theology that says you can believe in God just so long as you understand that we can't teach such, because we have to teach what the truth is, and what they're doing is infiltrating that child's mind to say, well, then the truth is not God. And I truly believe that the Lord can and will start a movement of churches that begin to open explicitly Christian schools that allow for the students that need to come and hear the gospel to come in and hear the gospel. And then you could see a wave of Christian education that then it would be said, just like Paul going into Thessalonica, these are the people that are turning the world upside down. Sadly, here in America, though we claim Christian, I don't see many churches turning the world upside down. It's kind of the opposite of that. We're too worried if we might offend somebody. We don't want to say something.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are about 40,000 teachers in Kentucky.
Yeah.
The vast majority profess to be Christians. 40,000 public school teachers.
Yes.
And yet they too often choose to be silent.
Yeah.
And they don't have to be. But these types of opportunities, as they grow, more private Christian school opportunities, those teachers who feel called to the field of education as ambassadors for Christ, they will have a place to flourish as well.
That's right.
I would like to mention Eureka, the European Association of Christian Educators, has a vision. We would like to see that every child in Europe will spend at least 1 year under influence of Christian educator. And if we cannot provide the good Christian school for every student, I think we should train the Christians in education to really be this light.
Yes.
Even if it's hard, but even one person can make a difference, because one person and God is majority.
That's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's what I appreciate about Honza and his experience in this area. He's been a leader in the Josiah Venture Gospel to Schools and other initiatives with the notion, the idea that so often a Christian educator is a frontline youth minister. Mm-hmm. They impact and have the potential to influence young people hours a day, days during the week after week. And I have a pastor friend who characterizes them as missions strategists. They're on that mission field. They can strategize, and one thing we try to do, and then they can build a bridge back to the church and help the church see how the church can be praying and resourcing and coming in to those areas and doing different things. And there are all kinds of different opportunities. But educators can be part of that strategy, right?
The very fresh example from my country, we are just piloting the program called Prayer Space in School. And we have tried on some places to prepare something like prayer room in public school. In one classroom, we prepare everything for students to come in and pray. And even on our pilot, the school said, "Oh, we don't have a big enough classroom to run this space." Yeah, and the Christian speaker, which was organizing this in this school, said, "Okay, so we can offer our space in church. It's next to school," and principal agreed. Yeah, and so they were running this prayer space actually in a church building, and every classroom from public school went and visit this prayer space and experience the great things.
Share a little bit about the tent that you told me about.
Yeah, there are a couple of stations where the students are going. One is the Wailing Wall, and they put the small papers with their sorrows. Yeah. And one which students really like was the Tent of Silence. And this is something what students usually don't experience, just to be in the silence. Yeah? So we have prepared, it's like a beach tent, and they can lay. And they had like a cover for their ears, that they can really experience this silence, enjoy it. And when they were in the tent, yeah, there were Bible verses around what they can read. And it actually became the station what they liked the most.
Wow. And how many schools were you able to put that in?
In Czech Republic is fresh. It's new, so we have about 4 schools which run it. But this movement coming from England is active in many countries, and they have a lot of experiences working really in public schools, even in the United States.
That's very good.
This is one of the reasons why with VIAC Kenia, we see the importance and value of helping our Christian educators be able to integrate their understanding of their faith with their vocation, that they're able to answer the question of what difference does it make that I am a Christian teacher and not just a Christian and a teacher. And I think what we see in things like these prayer spaces and the ethics and character development programs that we've been able to bring into public schools, but also this is the importance of having Christian schools as well, is how God works through us to transform the world now. Amen. Because what we see in Scripture with Jesus, where the great reversal happens in the incarnation, Jesus comes into the area of Palestine under Roman control. And especially with the Jewish people, they have all kinds of very strict rules about clean and unclean. And somebody who is diseased is unclean. And also we know now about how the transmission of disease happens. So, if somebody has a respiratory illness that is transferred through particles in the air, right, then you need to keep your distance and all this kind of stuff. And we know how contagions work. Well, when Jesus enters the picture, Jesus goes to these people with contagious diseases who are unclean, and he heals them. Not only is that person healed, but Jesus isn't getting disease, right? So, and neither is Jesus unclean. So Jesus reverses this process of touching the unclean people and making them clean. And all the way up to the point of where when Jesus encounters death, there's the great reversal in that death itself is overcome. And it doesn't get much darker than that. And so now Jesus sends us into the world together as his body to bring his healing. So when we go into public schools, we can have this fear that the world is going to infect us somehow. And okay, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we have that fear. But the Holy Spirit is empowering us as priests of the kingdom of God to go into dark places and bring light and life. And so that's the value of having Christian educators in public schools who are equipped for the task of being light and understand that they come in there as representatives of the kingdom. And also with Christian schools, the Christian schools can stand as representatives of that life and light that they are designed to be. And that will transform our societies.
That's right. And, you know, as the more, especially here in America, as the church becomes involved, and I think in your all's case, as the Christian schools begin to open more, that will become a challenge, a natural challenge to the public education system. The more of those that are available, the more space that is available in the Christian education space, and the more, so I think in our case for here in America, if churches would begin to rally behind that and open up their doors and open schools, and I'm a big fan of the Moses theology there. You know, what's in your hand, Moses? He's at the Red Sea, and the Lord said, what's in your hand? He said, what are we going to do? He said, what's in your hand? He could have said, pick up a rock. He could have said, speak to it. At one rock, he said, speak to the rock, right? He could have said, do anything else, but he said, what's in your hand? And Moses had his staff in his hand. He said, strike the water, and the water parted. And I think in the same way, churches really need to look at what's in your hand. Okay, you know, maybe everybody can't go crazy like Pastor Justin and Salt and Light and jump in and open a school for, you know, K through 12 in their first year and do it in 6 months. It'll be all right. We got this. The Lord's doing good things here. But could they open an elementary school? If their need is a middle school, could they open a middle school? Could they run 3 classes or 4 classes? I loved what you said about, you know, to have a goal to say that each student would spend a year with a Christian educator. That's wonderful. And what I believe could happen would be that the church is doing what the church should do, being the light, and that it eventually becomes a challenge to the public education system to step up and say, well, we recognize that something's happening there and people want to be there. There's something different happening there. And then to examine that and then see change in the public school space. I don't see the public school space going away because the church steps up, but maybe the public school space would have to examine what they're doing and open up to having Christian education classes and proper Christian education classes and what might be the transformative difference even in that space.
And they might recognize what Dawkins has.
That's right.
That we don't know yet what to call it, these values and character traits that we want in this worldview that makes sense, but we want what you got, and they start to learn, really going back to the founding.
Yeah.
Principles, first principles, right?
And here we are.
And it can be contagious.
Yes.
Light spreads and dispels the darkness and then continues to spread, right?
Yeah.
And does great things.
That's
Illumination. Right. I thought a lot about that during this eclipse thing and talked to some folks at work about that. What is an eclipse? It's blocking illumination. And we just want to take that block away and allow God's illumination just to...
I was so impressed at the eclipse. Were you all here for that? Were you local for that?
We were up in Wheaton, so yeah,
Okay.
we experienced it.
Did you? Was that totality? Was that?
No, we didn't get totality, but
I hear it's a big difference.
94%.
Okay, we got 99% here where we are, and even at 99%, I tried to take my phone and just take a picture, just a no filter, just a raw picture, just tried to take a picture, and it was so bright you cannot see any bit of the covering. You can't see any bit of the moon blocking the sun, even at 99%, because even that 1%. Now I could put my glasses on and I could see just a sliver, but if I took those glasses off, I could not even look up. You know, you're not supposed to anyways, and so I can't even look up. But then I like snap a picture with my phone. I'm like, hold my phone, I snap a picture, and it is so bright you can't. I would think it'd look at least a little bit less. I don't know, less lit up, you know, but and so I was thinking through that when that was happening. I was thinking, you know, even that 1% was so bright that we couldn't even look at it. And I think that is, again, a message of the light that Christ is. It might feel like humble beginnings of 12 or 15 schools or, you know, 500 educators. Might feel like humble beginnings for us with 150 students in a church, but even that little bit, if Christ is truly in it, then to look at it should shine very bright. And so I think that's what we're going to see. It sounds like you guys are already seeing that. So
yeah, and I also want to kind of bring it back around to the importance of supporting the Christian educators who are willing to go into those secular schools. And so churches that are thinking about, you know, where could we start? Is like, well, we can't. How would we ever start a school? Well, odds are you've got teachers in your church, so you could form some kind of, you know, vocational group with those teachers and find ways to help them integrate their faith with their vocation and encourage them and pray for them and equip them to be the best teachers they can be in that public school space. We have some resources that could help with that.
It's not, in my mind, an either or. Serving on the board of Christian Educators Association for a number of years, we support and help equip through the Daniel movement in the U.S. and in Europe, Christian educators, many of them in public schools, some in private school. But it's interesting talking to some of the Christian public school educators. Often you'll learn they don't have their kids in the public school. They private school or homeschool their own kids. And I think of it when Lori and I used to go to Ethiopia a lot. We loved to be on that mission field, but we would not leave our kids there. And so it's like you mentioned, Pastor Justin, 50 plus million kids in the public school system in America. And currently there are not enough opportunities for those to have other alternatives. And a lot of families don't have alternatives. And so there are going to be millions and millions of kids in that system. And it is a mission field. And so that's why I say it's not an either or, it's a both and. When we have the opportunity to provide a Christ-centered education founded upon first principles and Comenius's philosophy of biblical education, praise the Lord, but then we don't abandon that mission field that God has called individuals to. And so how do we support them there? Because they acknowledge that's their calling. And it's a tough calling too. It's not very far away, but it's in some cases for them, it feels like it's a far, far foreign mission field from their home church, even if it's just down the corner.
Yeah, and one of the things we're trying to do at First Principles is, though we don't have the physical time to think through all of this yet, because right now we're still on the raising funds, teachers, building deal, but the goal as we get going is to have programs to support the homeschools community and also to support the teaching community that is in public school, to help them to know their rights. You know, there's a lot of self-censorship that goes into public school teachers in America, and so to teach what their rights are, what they can do, and have resources for them to be able to turn to encourage those Christian educators to be the light. Don't be the light under a bushel, be the light that's shining bright, and even that little 1% could make a huge difference. And so, Christian educators remaining in that space is going to be vital. We can't abandon that space, but we should definitely be, we should be the light in that space. So, all right.
To mention how can we equip our Christian students to be light in those spaces?
That's right.
Christian students will be an important, valuable part of what will make Christian schools work as well as they should. But then they are missionaries in these public spaces as well. And that's another conversation probably.
Yeah, that's a conversation of equipping parents to equip their kids, because that's it's a minefield of a mission field.
It's a minefield.
For kids, and so we have to be careful, not naive, because it can be tough.
Yeah.
So,
And
Honza.
I would like to mention that one of the most effective methods how to form character and really raise up the new generation is by example. Yeah. And it's task for all of us. Yeah. It could be the youth pastor, it could be a parent, it could be teacher, but the students, the young people look at the example of our life, and the way how we live, they follow this example. Yeah. And sometimes it's said that even 80% of this, of the what they absorb is from the personality of the educator, and 20% is the content, what we taught. So so it's one principle, how example is important, and also another thing what I would like to mention is we teach that the repentance is one of the principles which has to be included in education, because even if we have big expectation on us, we sometimes fail. And the biggest problem then the fail is not to deal with our failure good way. If we are able to admit and learn from our mistakes, and they show our example of how we deal with mistakes, it's a great way how we can teach them through our own repentance.
Very good. Well, I think we're about at time. So how about we close out with, how about you guys give us some info for those who've made it this far in the camera that I'm not supposed to look at. We did this whole time. I just looked. Why don't you guys tell us how can people support your ministry, and then we'll talk about how they can support First Principles. And so I'll let you go first.
Okay. Well, Via Kenia is a new foundation in the Czech Republic, and in order to support the programs and the projects that we want to support, it's possible to make financial gifts to this organization. Also, Honza and I actually serve as missionaries. We also have to raise all of our support to do what we do. And so you could connect with us.
Where can they do that? Online?
They can do it. They can do it online. You can go to our website, which is conveniently www.viakemenia.cz/en.
Okay. We better say it again, because somebody's got to need a pen and paper for that one.
Yeah, or maybe we can we put a link somehow?
I'm sure we could probably do that.
Can get
You'll
to
have
that.
to text it to me.
Yeah. The /en will be important for our English language listeners, so they can get to the website in the English language.
Yeah. I'm not certain how many Czech listeners we have happening right now. So.
Yeah, but and we partner with a U.S. organization called 4D, which can help facilitate those gifts.
Okay.
And so we'll make sure everybody gets those links as part of the.
And you're also doing a feasibility study, right? And
Yes.
wanting to connect with people who would be amenable to having conversations about what this might all look like and how you
That's
sort of
correct.
strategize going forward.
We have a much larger goal to put together what will essentially be an endowment fund that we can use to build Christian schools or renovate buildings that Christian schools can then utilize in the Czech Republic. And we are launching a feasibility study in which we're looking for, where we ultimately would like to find 150 people here in the United States that would be willing to interact with us on this process of getting organized to do a very large capital campaign. And they could help us out by letting us know that they'd be willing to be contacted so that we can interact with them on that process of learning that we're going through as an organization towards effectively preparing for a large capital campaign.
Okay. Is that also on the Via Kenia website?
I don't know. Is it on the Via Kenia website?
It's on the private page, but we can.
Oh, it's on the private page. Okay,
We can
so
put it on the podcast.
but we can put it on the podcast links.
Okay, good. Well, and then also for those who want to give to First Principles, that can be done at saltandlightbaptist.org/school. So we've got everything there. You can hear about the school, hear about the project, where we are, and don't forget also, for those of you listening anytime in the next 2 weeks, April the 25th, we have our big vision tour. And 27th, I said the wrong date. Scratch that. Should edit that out. The April the 27th, we have our big vision tour. That's on a Saturday afternoon at 2 p.m. And so that's a free event to come to, but we're certainly looking for donors to come out and see what we're doing, see what the big vision is. I'm really excited about what some of those things that we're going to be able to show everybody. I don't know that I'm not certain yet that everyone's caught the full vision of what it'll be, but I think that vision tour will give a nice, clear picture of the big picture that we see. And so that's April the 27th at 2:00. So there you go. That's how to do it. We appreciate you all very much. So thank you guys for being willing to sit on the podcast today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Awesome.
Yeah. Have a great day.